Hey there guys, welcome to my Danganronpa V3 retrospective. So, I have a lot to talk about when it comes to this game. A lot. But let me go ahead and get started with the thing that I think everyone wants to hear me talk about the most, and that is the ending of the game. Needless to say, I think it goes without saying that if you haven't beaten the game yet, you should not be listening to this. I'm going to be talking quite explicitly about a lot of details about the end of the game, so please, if you haven't beaten the game yet, and there's a lot of spoilers coming up, so you might not want to watch this. The ending of the game is, a lot of people told me that it was a very controversial ending. People either loved it or hated it. I find myself being somewhat in between. I even said it during the trial. I think the ending of the game is good but flawed. The big issue I have with it is twofold. One, I said during the trial that I didn't like the way it kind of invalidated or lessened Danganronpa 1 and 2. And there were some people in comments that disagreed with me on that, and they're like, well, just because, you know, it's saying that the first two games were fictional doesn't mean they didn't matter. It doesn't mean that, what happened has any less emotional impact, and I disagree with that. And the big reason that I disagree with that is because it's just like if you go into a writing class, like one of the worst ways to end a story in the world is and then she woke up and realized it was all a dream ending, because it takes everything that happened and makes it nothing has any lasting impact in the world the story takes place. And that's kind of the same thing that this ending does. Yeah, the stories are still good, and I'm still glad I played them, but when canonically the game itself is discrediting the ending, it's very frustrating. It very much does feel as though the game is just saying, the characters that I've grown to love aren't going to have any more adventures because the whole thing was scripted to begin with. And again, of course I understand that the whole thing was scripted to begin with. I don't think the Danganronpa legitimately happened, but within the world, you treat it seriously and you wonder what's going to happen. And now what was going to happen doesn't make any sense because it's not an actual conflict. So that's frustrating. People did link to me a interview that was done with the creator, and what he said makes sense, but I kind of still disagree with it. He said his intention in making this reveal and in the way he did the last episode or the last trial was to get the player to unite with Shuichi and reject what Samugi was saying. When Samugi was saying that fiction can't affect the real world, they wanted the player to rebel against that and to kind of unite with Shuichi's last line of saying, fiction can change the world. The problem with that, and the reason I don't think that was effective, is because at the end of the day, the idea that you need to refute the statement that fiction doesn't matter, to me, doesn't even pass the laugh test. I don't feel any requirement to actually oppose that because it's such a stupid statement. Of course fiction can, affect the real world. The Civil War was largely caused by a piece of fiction called Uncle Tom's Cabin. When we went to war against, I want to say it was the Cuba, or maybe the Spanish-American War, it was just because they kind of made up a photo of a woman being searched that never happened. Of course fiction can affect the real world. And so I didn't feel any desire to actually contest that. It was such an obvious incident yes, of course this is the case, like, whatever. So my frustration and the thing I wanted to counter was the assertion that Danganronpa 1 and 2 were fictional. I didn't feel any need to defend fiction itself because the statement of Samugi just was stupid. And so that kind of fell flat. The other issue, I have kind of two big issues. One of it was that the stated purpose was in order to get you to kind of be on Shuichi's side and want to defend the value of fiction, which, like I've said, I felt no desire to do because it didn't make any sense. I didn't think it was a battle that was worth even discussing. And the second issue I had was that the ending seemed like it was designed for the hardcore Danganronpa, fans. The game kind of has as its climax the idea that the reason that Danganronpa keeps happening and the reason that you continuously have the killing game go on is because the fans keep wanting to see it. And for hardcore fans, that's absolutely true. The hardcore fans absolutely continuously want to see Makoto and Hajime and all of the characters go forward and run into more trials and have to continuously overcome the terrible things that are happening to the world. Totally works, totally makes sense. The problem is that for the casual Danganronpa player, it doesn't work at all. The casual player wants to play the games and wants to meet new characters and wants to solve interesting trials. The casual player has no interest in continuously to watch these characters suffer. They have no interest in watching them suffer at all. They're there for the exploration and the trial. They're there for the mystery and to solve the mystery. If the mystery was about who stole Miu's underwear, we'd still play the game. We have no interest in watching murders happen, and we certainly have no interest in seeing the story continue to more and more terrible things. We don't want there to be an anime to come out. We don't want there to be manga or visual novels or doujin jumps. And some of those may be the same things. I do not know enough about Japan to know what the difference between those three terms are. And so, to be told the reason Danganronpa keeps happening is because I keep wanting it, and I'm like, well, I keep wanting the mystery, but the desire to make it about murder is all on you, Mr. Developer. I had nothing to do with it. And so I do kind of get the thrust of the last bit is to a group of people that does not include me as the player. And because of that, it made the ending a little bit, the ending didn't quite work because it misattributed the appeal of Danganronpa itself. The appeal of Danganronpa isn't the interesting executions or, that hope will overcome despair. The appeal, like I said, is the complexity of the mysteries. And it felt like the game didn't understand that. Cat? Jeebus. Give me a heart attack. Crazy cat. Anyway, so that was a little bit frustrating. And like I said, the actual ending works for a hardcore fan. Absolutely works for a hardcore fan, but I'm not one. I never read any of the manga. I only watched the anime because you guys really wanted me to watch the anime and kind of talk about it. So for me, when I was playing that, I was just like, well, no, this doesn't really work at all. And now let me talk about how that could have been fixed. I understand why it happened. The developer is obviously constantly getting inundated by requests of the hardcore fans, and so it's very easy for him to forget that the average fan is not going to be like that. The average fan isn't going to want all the stuff the hardcore fans want. And so when he makes the ending, he's making it in response to all the requests he gets from hardcore fans, and doesn't really think about how it's going to be for the average player. What he could have done if he wanted it to work a lot better would have simply been to, instead, it would have been very easy to make a slight tweak to the story in order to, I feel like, make it work better for everyone. And all it would have taken is to say, okay, so Danganronpa 1 and 2 happened, Junko Inoshima, had the event occur, and the entire world was plunged in despair. And then the Future Foundation was formed in order to fight back, and over several years they eventually restored order, and hope triumphed over despair. On the 1-year anniversary of that occurring, as sort of a memorial and a look at how far we've come, they went ahead and rebroadcast the events of Danganronpa 1. And it ended up being very, very blissful and very cathartic, and because everyone knew it worked out, and so they were able to go through and watch the things that were so terrifying before, only now it was, since they knew it had a good ending and they knew what ultimately happened, it gave them sort of a release. and it ended up being immensely popular. So a year later, on the second anniversary of Hope, the Future Foundation eliminating the remnants, they went ahead and went into the Future Foundation archives and broadcast Danganronpa 2. And this was even more entertaining, and people loved it even more because they'd never seen Danganronpa 2. They had no idea it happened, but they knew it still worked out in the end. So going forward, on the third anniversary, they ended up making a scripted event where they just kind of, very clearly said, hey, this is not an actual thing that's happening, but, on this third anniversary, we're going to show this now. And they just kept going through that. And it got more and more popular as time went on. And eventually, we get to V3, where it has become almost like a reality game show that people are so into it and so enthralled by it that people actually volunteer to participate knowing that they could die. But the world's gotten so finger quotes good that the introduction to despair and the continual celebration of hope overcoming despair has become the most popular pastime. And so people are willing to, volunteer for this, and there are people that legitimately die in it, but they do it with full understanding that may happen. Going this route and doing it this way lets you preserve Danganronpa 1 and 2. You don't have to invalidate the first two games. You don't have to take away from the effect of what happened. And at the same time, it allows you to go forward, and the real crux of the Danganronpa games, it lets you kind of have social commentary about the reason that Danganronpa keeps happening, the people who keep thirsting for despair, is society in general. You don't make it about the fans, because if you do, which if you do take the route you actually did, that you'll only be describing a small subsect of the fans, and everyone that's not in that subsect is going to be confused and kind of almost feel picked on for things they didn't even do. You're going to misattribute why they play the game, and it's going to go over like a, lead banana. I feel like that's how the game should have been done. It kind of lets you have almost the same story, the same twist, but it doesn't require you to, kind of involve everyone that plays the game, even though it's not really everyone that plays the game. So that's my thoughts on the ending. Overall, like I said, though, even though I'm complaining about the ending, I didn't think the ending was bad. I thought the ending was a really good ending for this game. My big issue was in how it related to previous games and kind of what it had to say about why Danganronpa was popular, which I disagreed with. But in terms of the game itself, I thought it was fine. If this had been a standalone game, it would have been fantastic. It's just, don't mess with the established canon that came before, because it feels disrespectful to me. The other thing I want to talk about, the characters. There's two things I want to talk about. First of all, if you guys remember my retrospective of Danganronpa 2, the characters were one of my big complaints about Danganronpa 2, because I felt like Danganronpa 2 did not do a very good job really letting you know the characters. Almost all of the actual detail about the individual characters in Danganronpa 2 came from free time events. You didn't really learn about them through the course of the story. 3 did a much better job of that. I really do feel like I know these guys. Some of them not as well as others. Obviously, Rantaro and Kaede are big question marks for me. But the ones that survived any length of time at all, I really do feel like I have an understanding of kind of who they are and what occurs. And then the other thing is, let me talk briefly about the trials. The trials, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about Trial 1, because I definitely did that in the playthrough. All I'll say is I still feel as though Trial 1 was mishandled. I still feel a little bit betrayed by Trial 1. Trial 1 involved showing a scene in real time in which information that occurred was not communicated. And I still feel as though that's underhanded. I feel like we should be able to trust that the game is accurately reporting things that are happening in the room that we as the player are occupying. And yeah, it's like, well, but that would have ruined the twist. I'm like, well, then the twist relies on the game lying to you. So I still don't like Trial 1. Trial 2 was mostly fine. The only real issue I had with Trial 2, well, I had two. One was that the trial the investigation implied, or outright stated, that if any part of your body enters the pool, that counts as entering the pool, and that's a violation of the rules. But when you actually get to the trial, you find out that only if your feet enter the gym that it counts as entering the gym. And I feel, the entire trial was built around the idea of being able to move into the piranha tank after 10 p.m., but the information that was possible wasn't communicated until the trial itself. Because they did say, there was a question of, well, what if someone just fished something out and they said, you know what, even if you, dip your little toe in, it will be, counted as swimming, which I guess was supposed to communicate that it goes by where your feet are placed, but it was not communicated with anything even approaching clarity. And the second thing is, and granted, I'm not disputing, I'm not saying that I should have been right, but the thing that exonerated Mew from being the killer was not communicated either. The actual investigation just said that Mew was seen in the courtyard several times. Didn't say for how long, didn't say at what times, just that she was seen. Well, when I thought about how it was done, I was like, well, Mew was moving back and forth between the tennis pro's, cell, and then she goes to the gym, and then she'll have to go over to the swimming pool, and then over to the gym, then back to the swimming pool. So she will be seen in the courtyard several times as she moves around. I was thinking it was her because she is the one person that can actually get stuff done after 10 p.m. because she can go into the gym with robots, which will clearly not violate the rules. So, but still, the actual explanation makes sense. It makes more sense than what I thought. I just feel like the evidence that's supposed to make it so Mew can't do it didn't actually make it so Mew can't do it. Third trial, absolutely fine, no problem. No issues with that trial. The only thing that frustrated me with a little bit about it is that realistically, looking back at the trial, if, I can't remember his dang name. It was a really long and weird name. It was like Kokiryu or something. But if he had just stopped at the first murder, he would have gotten clean away from it. Or cleanly away with it. Only because he, for some, and I know why he did it, but because he wanted to kill two people is the only reason we caught him. And I'm like, dude, just quit while you're ahead. You had it. There was absolutely no way we would have figured out it was him if we hadn't had the second murder, because that's what caused us to investigate below the floorboards in that room. He would have completely gotten away with it. Oh man. Everyone else I feel like I caught. That one I feel like he screwed up. Fourth trial, that was Mew's. Fine, perfect. Figured it out pretty much completely. It worked out well. I thought it was relatively well done. I don't have any issues with it. Fifth trial was godly. I loved the fifth trial. Fifth trial, I did figure out who did it, but there was a lot of stuff I didn't figure out until the trial. But again, it was very well executed. It's weird. The trials got harder as the game went on, but yet I got better at solving them. So that was pretty good. I liked that. I felt like I got better at the game as time went on. And then I already talked about the ending. So all of that said, my final kind of takeaway about Danganronpa V3 is that it has the most enjoyable trials in the series. I do think it and 2 have the best trials. The first trial just straight up pisses me off, but all the other ones are legit. All the other ones are good. I do feel like it had a problem of escalation. Despite what the creator says, I do feel like a lot of what happened with Trial 6 is he wanted to make an even bigger finale than he had in Danganronpa 2. And I have to take a little bit of issue with Tsumugi. The biggest thing that makes me annoyed about her, there's 2 big problems with what I have in what is ultimately revealed as to be happening. Number 1 is I'm not a huge fan of the idea that Tsumugi is writing these plot lines and like causing Maki to fall in love with Kaito. That doesn't make any sense to me. Because I'm kind of left with, okay, how did she do that? Because I've seen how you make a flashback light, and the flashback light just imprints memories. And it's very, very, very obvious when a flashback light is used. You don't just wake up and suddenly have new memories you didn't know about. So there was never a point that I know of that Maki just suddenly had new memories implanted. I mean, she would be aware of that. Additionally, it's not like they could have added it into an existing flashback light and been like, oh, also Maki remembers this, because there's no option to do that. The flashback lights work and give the same memories to everyone at the same time. So the issue of how she actually did that is a very, very, very legitimate question in my mind. And I don't know, I don't feel like that was really discussed. And the other issue is it's funny because a couple times in the playthrough I said, you know, I wonder if they're just giving us memories and we're not ultimates at all. But then I rejected that because of, you know, there are certain abilities people showed that are very clearly associated with being ultimates. Now, some of it is explained by being able to implant memories. That's how Maki knew how to assemble a crossbow. But there's other things that aren't, you know. How exactly is Samugi able to, you know, cosplay and, you know, change costumes in real time like we see at the end if she's not really an ultimate cosplayer? Granted, maybe she actually is an ultimate, no one else is. But then how could Gonta see the nano Kumas? He couldn't see them very well, but still, he obviously had way better than average vision if he could make them out at all, but yet he's supposed to be a guy with no special talents whatsoever. Additionally, you've also got, you know, just a couple of things that come up through the course of the playthrough that just don't really seem like they fit the idea that we can't do it. I forget what the other one is. There was another one I kind of noticed. I'm like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. But it's flipped my mind right now. But it's just, the idea of us being just regular people doesn't quite fit with the things we see happening in the game. And lastly, just kind of as a parting thought, you know, overall, I know I'm complaining about it a lot. I always do in the retrospectives. You can't just keep talking about how it's awesome and it's cool and everything's great the whole time. I do enjoy Danganronpa V3. I think it's a really, it's a high quality game. It's worthy of being a Danganronpa game. I just feel like it needs to be comfortable being a Danganronpa game. It doesn't need to keep trying to escalate. You know, at the end, everything still comes down to Junko Enoshima, but Samugi is doing more than Junko ever could. And I don't think that's necessary. I think you can keep the same format going on. I would have been fine. They're trying to reach too far. They're trying to be too much, and I'm like, you're already really good at what you are. You don't need to be anything else. The Kuma kids, the Mono Cubs, that's what they're called. I don't really feel like they were necessary. I don't feel like they really added that much to the game. That's the one thing, that's the one stylistic choice I kind of disagree with, to be honest. I don't think it really actually helped. But we've been doing this for a while. I do think that's kind of all of my thoughts. So I'll go ahead and end the retrospective here. Overall, I do like Shuyuichi quite a bit. I do think that the game holds together very well. I have some issues with some of the stylistic choices that were being made. I think that you don't need to change what Danganronpa. You can just be a Danganronpa game and you would have been fine. The one last thing I will say, and I don't quite know how this would work, but I think it would be really awesome if they let you choose which person to serve as the protagonist, and they just straight up said, you know, if you choose to be the murderer, there'll just be scenes that are omitted. There's some of those that wouldn't work. You know, it's not perfect, because, like, if you chose to be Miyu during the trial where she gets killed, then you'd see her, like, walk through the wall. Like, there are things that wouldn't work. There's other things that would work perfectly fine. You know, if you chose to be the ultimate maid, you could just end the scene after she built the stage and then said, you know, have Gonta come in, have her send Gonta away, just say, no, I'm not going, and just have him kind of whimper and wander off. And then you just, you know, and then I went back to my room and woke up the next day, and boom, there's a murder. You have to be very clear of, yo, if you choose to be the murderer, we're not going to show you anything associated with the murder. But that way you could actually be all the different characters. I think that would be really interesting and really cool, and actually see the game. It may be more work than it's worth, but I think it's an interesting idea to explore. And it would let them kind of go forward with the game and just have a lot of replay value. I think it would be really interesting. But regardless, I will see you guys. I guess I won't see you guys in the next one. This is the last episode. This is the retrospective. I'll see you guys in other Let's Plays. How about that?